Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Jones, known in the society as Maestra Tatiana Verlioni, and I'm here to talk about my class, Pretty Parasols for Pennies. So the question that I get asked the most frequently is parasols. That's a really odd thing to get into. What got you into researching parasols? I have extremely sensitive skin. I burn just in a snap. So my friend invited me to Australia War one year, and I put on like SPF 50 3 times a day. I still burned. And the first day I was wearing a partlet similar to this, where you can see the lovely open work elements. It was in a nice diamond pattern. So I had a stripe of diamond sunburns right here. So the next day I was like, we're going to wear like a linen one. And I had it open. So then I had a V burn layered here. And the next weekend I was in a wedding and wore a strapless gown. So as I'm there with like the self-tanning lotion, trying to like draw in the lines, I was like, this is ridiculous. What did they do in the 16th century? Because obviously I need some help. And I will share my screen out at this point. And if you are on a phone, you may have to zoom in a little bit. View, full screen mode. There we go. Okay, so, oh, actually, that's not what I wanted to share. So I ran across this picture of Giovanna going to the mines, which I just fell in love with. She's got this cute little pink parasol. Okay, can everybody see the parasol there? Okay, cool. So I was flipping through Moda Forense one day, and I saw this picture of Giovanna going to the mines, and I was like, oh, I have to have a pink parasol with gold accents. I must. So I started researching into them and came across some really interesting resources along the way. During our period, I've managed to find 3 different styles of parasols. This is me trying to get back to my handout, sorry. There we are. Okay, so the 3 different styles I found are first, a kind of a bars and stretchers style, which is very similar to what we have modernly, where you've got the ribs and it's got little stretcher bars inside and you go thoop and it just flares out. The second style is one that I call the processional parasol. You see it very often over important people like Giovanna in the previous picture, where there's a stick and you can see it kind of at an angle and it's shading the person in front, which we'll get to that in a minute. And then the third style, you can see featured here on this first page, a little drawing from a Roman essential bath kit. Now I can only date this one to like the 5th, 6th century Rome. I'm not sure when else it existed, but I thought it was a really neat idea. And so I made one because I like ancient Roman hair. So we'll just jump right in with the histories. The first question that I asked was, how far back does this go? So the oldest example I've been able to find dates back to 1350 BC. And it is King Ashurbanipal. You can see him in his chariot here. He's overviewing the battle that's going on, and you can see he's got a little curtain on the back side of his parasol so that, you know, he's nice and shaded while everyone else fights. It's good to be the king. Whenever you are researching, sorry, I feel like I'm jumping around a lot. When you're researching, you'll often run across 2 terms, parasol or umbrellino. And modernly, we like to use them kind of interchangeably. When I was researching, you found that the parasols were more to protect you from the sun, and the umbrellinos were often more for inclement weather, like the rain. They were cited as being made out of lightweight leather, like otters, I guess, you know, in the river. And I want to say I ran across a source for waxed linen, but I can't recall where. So take that at face value. So then the next question is, was this only for fancy people, or did regular people have it as well? I will say it's probably still more of a well-to-do person's accessory, not the common man's accessory. But I did find examples of it in ancient Rome where you saw kind of this tradition, or transition, sorry. Oh, right. I thought this was funny. So there was even a controversy at the amphitheater that some people would bring their parasols dyed to support their favorite chariot team, and patrons would complain that they couldn't see the chariot races down below. And I was like, wow, you know, things never change, right? It's like some sort of a foam finger. Um, so I was like, well, that's very clearly not just, you know, the people in charge, right? If you're bringing it as sports paraphernalia, that was at least somewhat commonly accessible. So it starts out in the 4th century being viewed as more of a feminine accessory. There's an excerpt where somebody is chiding someone, talking about how this was a pretty fellow who had presents brought to him on Matron's Day, which was basically like our Mother's Day, which is coming up. Happy Mother's Day, everybody. And one of the items that they listed is a green sunshade. And I had someone who speaks Italian verify that the way it was phrased, they were talking about a personal covering. So then you get to the 5th century, and Emperor Claudian suggests that parasols should be discarded in time of war, which seems to suggest that not just men, but soldiers were now carrying sunshades to protect them from the sun. Although I find it funny that it needs to be mentioned that you discard them in times of war. And then by the time you get to the 6th century, there was a writing where somebody was talking about how tragic this young man's death was, that if he had not just been, you know, scatterbrained and left his sun protection at home, he would still be with us. I don't know if he had an extreme heat stroke or what, but they're talking about that. You can see on the left side there's a coin from Judea from AD 37 to 44. And it's got a really interesting parasol with a slope shape, which I tried to recreate, and I will show you in a moment. And you very often see them in processions and formal events and ceremonies. And the ceremonial ones are always really decked out to the nines. Like the Doge of Venice here, he has some intricate carving on the handle, and he's got like a cupid up there on the top and double layers, and you know, the poor guy holding it has to have a belt to support this thing. And then you see kind of a more simplistic one down here on this coat of arms. Oh, did I not put where that was from? I should have. But you can see that that's the more bars and stretchers style that collapses. Okay, so here is a how to make your pattern, and I will make sure to get this handout somewhere accessible other than just the meeting so that people can have it. The holes there are for you, the blanks, are for you to fill in whatever dimensions that you would like your parasol to be. And if you do the math out, it should tell you what your pattern pieces need to be. I included pictures of my parasols so that if you liked how much space they took up in relation to my body, I listed what the dimensions of those were below, so that if you're like, yep, I like the size of that one just fine, that's the numbers that I use to make mine. The materials. So first we'll go over the bars and stretchers one. So on that one, I used in the finial, there's this really neat part that's a machine screw on one side and a wood screw on the other. I'm gonna maybe I should stop sharing the handout if I'm gonna do that. But you can see a picture of it there, and it's got a little receptacle piece, the little brass piece there, that's wood screw on the outside and has a machine screw threads on the inside. I found personally, if you put washers on the screw, that you could use a wrench to screw that in without breaking. The little brass thing has notches for trying to use a screwdriver. It shears, and I don't recommend that. And there's some pictures of how I put it in there. Okay, so ribs and stretcher style. So this is a parasol frame that's believed to be from Diane de Poitiers from the mid-16th century. And you can see that she's got some wooden square bars with their little metal ends that are fitting into that sliding joint. And at the time, I did not have any metalworking skills to speak of, so I was trying to think, well, what could I use for the hinge piece that I can figure out on my own? So I made kind of an octopus out of leather. I made these little cylinders out of leather with a central piece so that I could still make something that would move but stay together. And I did drilled holes through each of the bars so that I could stitch through them with the leather and make sure that they were going to stay even when I opened and closed the parasol. So here's some pictures of the inside of my incredibly messy parasol there. I tried doing it with flexible wire, and it wiggles around a bit. So my lessons learned is next time, if I plan to remake this style, to do a channel, like a circular channel around where the bars are, and then use something thicker, like think a metal coat hanger type of gauge, to make a metal ring to thread each of the little ribs onto, or the stretcher bars, sorry, and then place them into their little grooves and put a little topper piece on it. So below there are the sketches of my proposed how this would work better and not be a little wiggly when you go to open it. My woodworking ended up so chewed up that I covered it with some decorative leather, so you can't see how chewed up it is. So the next style is the hoops method. These were either hardened leather rings or wooden rings that I found in the sources. And the things that I found interesting is you can see in Giovanna's portrait where it's sort of tilted slightly, like it's not exactly parallel to the ground. And I found when I made that style that that's how the fabric tension makes the parasol behave whenever you're holding it forward to shade someone, is it does exactly that. It never stays exactly parallel to the ground. It's always tilted just slightly forward, which also ended up having the interesting benefit of making it a bit more stable. So when the wind blows and stuff, it doesn't move around a lot. If you are trying to use this for you personally, I find the style kind of frustrating because you want to put, you know, your parasol back on your shoulder throughout the day, or at least I do. And so then I keep like clocking my forehead with the edge of the hoop, which is frustrating. But it works really great for retinue type situations because you can have a nice long pole on there and, you know, have the pole back in your space without having your arm up in the queen's ear, right? And she can be shaded, which is, you know, what it was used for in our period. You can see a 12th century fresco there of Constantine. I actually found a color one of that one later that I'm going to share. I was very excited to find a color one. And there's a 13th century one of Herod. Just trying to read over my notes, make sure I'm not leaving something big out. Okay. And then the final style is the Roman bath parasol, which I wanted to make so that it could lay flat. It's impossible to tell from that stone carving if there's indeed swung or not, but I made mine so that I could go into merchants' booths and stuff without having to navigate with my parasol. So it just kind of folds down and I stick it next to my side. And I'll show you all of mine in just a second. Normally I do it while we're going, but since there's just the one screen, we're going to try this in pieces. I also made mine so that it has a cutout and the ribbons just slide through the cutout and tie on the other side. And that's how I have mine hinge, which you'll see in a minute. And then, oh, on the drawing, you can see they have little finials that are coming out of the corners. Instead of that, I decided to do a little pocket in the fabric. But you can absolutely put some finials in there. Allegedly, this mosaic is of a parasol. I have my doubts, but I included it because that's what the museum people said that it was. And I was like, is that the bars and stretchers variety? Is that, looks like one of those whirligig things, right? That you spin as a kid. So then we get to kind of one of my favorite parts. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to stop sharing and show you my 3 styles, and then we'll loop back to ornamentation. Okay, so can everybody see me again? Okay. Right. So first up, see if I can go back without taking myself out. Can you still hear me? Okay, so this is my bars and stretcher style. And a little bit on ornamentation. You can decorate yours however you want. Mary Queen of Scots had a red one with little gold buttons. You can see in pictures, there's some that have like dancing ladies that are gold worked on the tabs. There's one that's like got gold worked cupids that you'll see in a minute. So I say just let your imagination run wild. I tried to, oh, I put like a little flower garden down here with the thistle because that was my first art award. And then I painted like another art award up here on the finial. So I just added little special things that were important to me. And this has a wooden frame. And it slides up and whoop, this could be interesting. Okay, so there's a little pin that just goes through a hole. On my slider ball, I made the hole extra wide and I lined it with leather so that it can slide up and down the pole easily without scratching up the bar. And people always ask me whenever I've got this, they're like, is that super heavy? Because, you know, it's wood and it's fair, but it's really not. Like I've had kids play with this. It's super lightweight. Here we go. Oh no, my tree. There we go. I know, it's like, there's no way to do this in my living room. I'm just gonna go outside. So that's my bars and stretchers one. And then, oh, the wind's going to carry it across. As I mentioned, the, chopping my head off. There we go. The processional parasol, or the hoop style, was made of hardened leather or wooden rings, and it's kind of just like a hoop skirt on a stick, honestly. So I decided, why not have a modern tweak and use hoop skirt wire, right? Because this way I can have it in a little tiny ball that fits in my carry-on, and I just have to deal with the pole, right? So it just kind of pops out. Now for this one, I made it like the coin that we saw from Judea, where it had a wide neck at the top and kind of the slopey seams, because I thought that looked really interesting and I was curious if I could get it to work that way. So to do the top of this, excuse me, I used the top of one of those little wooden boxes that you can get at the craft store. And I covered it in fabric. So there's 2 discs, one on the outside and one on the inside, that are little wooden covered discs. And I sandwiched the seams between the 2 of those. And then the topper for this is a little clock face that just so happened to fit kind of perfectly with the box. Okay. Now I got to adjust that and step back again. Okay. So this is the processional style, and you can see when you hold it out at an angle, it kind of causes that tension where it's not exactly parallel with the ground. Do you see that? It's kind of tilting just a little bit that way. And it ends up being like really pretty sturdy. I mean, like I'm shaking that pretty good, but I'm not too terribly worried about clocking the very important person underneath. And if so, I can just grab this tab and pin it to the pole, right? So then it's really not going to shift much. If you are doing it on yourself, however, I keep doing this number throughout the day, and it does not work as well. So you're like constantly fighting with it. So I really recommend for personal use the ribs and stretcher, way better. But if you've got, you know, want to make one for royalty, this is awesome, and it goes together super fast. I'll show you in a little bit the one that I made for Atenvelt when I lived there. I made a little crossbody bag to hold it, and I put a little pocket on the strap so that they could just like seat the pole into the strap, and you can like change out arms. You know, I always feel bad for whoever's holding the pole all day next to the queen's head, right? They must have biceps of steel. So I'm gonna need that in a minute. Oh, the other neat thing about this style, because it is just like a hoop on a stick, if you fully line it, you can make it reversible. And now I've got a green one, right? And the advice that I always give when I teach my class, because I'm a little bit vain, whatever you line your parasol in, make sure it's something that is complementary to your skin tone, because that's what will be framing you in a nice big circle. So if there's a color you love that makes you look like you're jaundiced, don't use that one. Okay, and then the third style is the little Roman bath kit one, which is a square. I kind of designed mine, I printed out all of these little templates to design, and I designed mine so that like it made me think of quilting squares. So I had map colors, and I started sort of just drawing out what, you know, designs that I thought would look good on a square. So to make the pole on this, too close. This is a table leg that I got from the hardware store because I do not have a lathe or the ability to turn anything on my own. And it was just a little short on its own. So then I got a chair leg, which is just a little rectangle, and I carved the center out of it so that it's got a hole, because on its own, once I put the chair leg on, it was the right height, but it kind of hit a tipping point where it starts to go back on my shoulder, and then it's like, whoa. So I took the center bits out to remove a lot of the weight, but it also created the ability for me to make this flex. So I wish I could stick my camera in the tree right now, but we're just going to have to bear with. So these are the two dowel rods that I'm going to use. And I've got my little pockets here. Oh, and whenever I was decorating this, so you see them with fringes and beads and all kinds of things. So I decided I want to do some really fancy skirting on this, and I wanted to accent it with some beads. Well, when I stitched it on, like I went and I got the entire, all the skirting stitched on, and I'm like, oh, good job me. And I went to hold it up and realized I'd stitched it on the inside, not the outside. And I was like, well, bugger. And I didn't feel like seam ripping all of that mess off. So I put a second one on the outside. So it's just got double sparkle. Okay. This is the part where I wish I could show you, but maybe I will just, oh, I forgot. Threaded this on. It's been a while since I've used this one. Sorry. So I made holes So this dowel rod goes through this hole, and then the one that swings, there's just a little channel up at the top. So they make an X. And I forgot to thread this one through. There we go. Okay, so because of this, whoop, and I'm gonna have to back far away to see that. It kind of looks a bit like that carving where you have kind of the kite on a stick, yeah? And because I made it so that it swings this way, now I can go into stores and stuff and just put this, you know, down here and not knock everything over in the store. Then to use it, I just have a string. Let's see if you can see that. And this just threads through the little cage. It's hard to do and try and stay in frame. Okay, and then I'm gonna have to put it down to tighten it, but whoa, hello. You just tie it there. Let me tie it and I'll try and get that to the camera. There we go. So I just have it looping through the cage and then tying around the dowel on the opposite side. So now it ends up being a nice lightweight, and you can kind of move it wherever you need it during the day for your shade. And it's an interesting little shape. I ran across a couple of other interesting shaped ones that you'll see in just a sec. Okay. I think now is the picture time. On here can get really windy. I very much recommend the bars and stretcher style or the Roman style if it's for personal use. I live in Oklahoma. It's actually tornado season. I'm quite happy that we don't have tornadoes today. It works out well with the plan, but we have a lot of wind. And the bars and stretcher one, I don't fight with. The processional one, again, if you're protecting someone else, it doesn't move much once you get it out there. And I will say, I think the wider neck on that one really helped with the stability. Some of them go up to a point, and the point gives it a lot more swing. That extra wide neck just kind of makes it so that it can't move around as much. So that's my recommendations for wind. Okay, so now we're going to share this out. So here's some examples of other parasols I found that are not all in the handout. So King Ashurbanipal is there, but this one from 440 BC is not. And I just thought it was a really interesting style with this little triangular wedge over her head. That's from 440 BC in Greece, I believe. Oh, and I'm gonna have to drag the zoom window so that I can click to the next. There we go. And then zoom back out. Bloop. Okay, so first up I did the ribs and stretchers, it looks like. So this one is 14th century. I know Giada, you were asking about 14th century. You know, clearly this is some sort of allegorical thing. It is Rudolf von Imm's Jansen Innekel. I'm just gonna not proceed further because I will slaughter it more. But you can see it's the bars and stretchers style. So that's a 14th century one. This one's 16th century. And oh yeah, we'll get to that in a little. So just kind of pay attention to kind of the neat details. So you can see he's got a really cool finial on the top of the carving on that. And I really like this guy. So you can see on this one, he has not just the bars and stretchers, but he seems to have multiple holes drilled along the pole so that you can have that set at various points of flare out. And I have noticed, depending on how you do the length of your bars and stretchers, you can end up with them like this, or if you keep pushing it, there's kind of a tension point that it'll pass and it almost like pops, and you can pop them back up into the top part as well. So I'm curious if that's why his are done like that. If they just made it, because you can see they go all the way out to the edge, whereas mine go halfway up the ribs. So mine you can't really pop. But I noticed in an attempt to stabilize the Processional hoop style one, I added a washer and some ribbons going to the washer, and I put the ribbons out at the points of the edge of the parasol so that it would be kind of like having, you know, built-in ribs. And I noticed that with those, that there was different tension points, and it was interesting to observe where those were whenever the parasol was shifting. So just wanted to point his out really quick. And there's another 16th century Italian gentleman riding. I have to say, you need to be a really skilled horseman, I would think, to handle a parasol while also riding. Although I guess if you can handle a spear, you know, why not? Okay, so now we get into some really fancy. I love how this one is made out of brocade. And it's got just the coolest finial on it with like a little person and a vase, and it's got these big bead tassels going around it and an intricately carved pole. I thought that one was really neat. And then this one made me laugh. Like, I'm not sure what the purpose was there. Feel like he needs to rotate it so that the opening is more for him to be able to see in front of him, but there you go. He's got a special little holder for it and everything. We're going to assume that's on his saddle, not his armor. And then we get into the processional style. This is from the 11th century on the Harley Psalter, the 2nd to 3rd quarter of the 11th century. And here's a color version of the 12th century one that I had in the handout. You can see it's striped with little white tassels. And then I included some of the canopies, whoop, wrong way. The canopies that you see over kind of the throne or presence chamber areas, because a lot of them, honestly, they look exactly like the processional style parasols. And part of me wonders if maybe you could just, you know, that's like a portable royal presence sort of thing, because you see them hanging from the ceiling in some of these. And I was like, that's just, you know, a pull away from being a parasol. You just need to like pop that in and hook it off and off you go. Oh, where's my next button? Come on. There it is. Okay. This one was interesting. I'm curious if this one's maybe the bar and stretcher style, just because you can see on this pole, like all of these poles on these 3 parasols have a bend in them. And so it's like, is that a way so that, you know, it looks like whenever we, you know, swear fealty on this sort of state, like it kind of looks like maybe that's what's going on here, right? And so I'm curious if they did that little jot so that it could cover and center things without hitting people in the head. And this is Pope Alexander III from 1525 to 26. So here's one of those that's just suspended from the ceiling. And you can see this one also has kind of the cool sloped lines of the silver one that I made. And it's got little seashell tassels most likely, and maybe some green fringe. Very colorful, fancy. This one has its own crown. It's a very special canopy there. And this one has a motto of some sort written on it, and I wish that I knew what. And here's another one with a crown and seashells. This one has a castle, which I thought was great. And this one's like uber fancy. So you can see this one has like little angel faces in gold on it. I'm assuming maybe gold work. And you can see it's also just kind of suspended from the ceiling, and then has what looks to be maybe a counterweight to keep it from swinging around a lot. And this one was interesting because you can very clearly see the hoop for the support system. And I don't know if that one was actually meant to be transparent or if there was a restoration at some point that made it so, but I thought it was interesting that you could still very clearly see the hoop in this one. And this is from 1450. And here's one that is super duper fancy. I like how it's got 3 different types of tabs on it and a beautiful lily topper there and 3 different colors going on. Ah, there we are. So there's me and Roman with my Roman one. And that one, you see, as you just saw, you see the hoops and stretchers and, or the bars and stretchers and the hoop style throughout the whole period. But that one in particular was based on a coin from Judea in 34 AD. So I thought, perfect for Roman, right? There's my friend wearing it in 12th. And there's my bars and stretchers one. Okay, so let me share out some designs, I guess. Actually, I'm gonna stop and move to the other portion because normally I show those all sort of at the end. I feel very disjointed today. Okay, still in frame. Normally I have a class volunteer. Today we're using my dress form pole. Say hello to Anne Boleyn's base. Okay, so I did up this parasol to show you just how much you can change the look of it with different skirting or decorations. Oh, I'm gonna have to move this out of the way. And then the wind's gonna fight me. So there you go, that's what the wind does, if it's not at an angle. So here you can see one skirting style. I'd move closer, but then it wouldn't be in frame. Then I've got one that was just the inverse of what I cut out. I thought it was an interesting shape. So you can see different styles there. And then, let's see here. Oh, don't get caught up on my India. Nope, that goes on top. Okay. So there's a skirting style with some points. But what if you took another one and layered it so that your points overlap a bit? There we go. Now you've got kind of a nice little window frame effect, and you could maybe paint or embroider something really cool on those little peekaboo skirting, or let's say you've got an element of heraldry that you really love. I don't have them on mine, but I've always thought ermine tails look super cool. So, oh, I needed the red one. Just a sec. Bring this one back. So instead of that, what if you ran your heraldry design up onto the parasol space a little bit? And now you've got little ermine tail dags kind of overlapping. Okay. Then these ones kind of mirrored what that jewelry piece with Athena had, some of these interesting shapes on hers. Oh, my stars. Wind is making things fun. Okay, there we go. So you can see kind of how it looks with different tabs. Hope that gives some ideas for things that you can use for a topper. It's interesting just kind of walking around the store. A lot of curtain rods. Curtain rods have really interesting finials on them. If you can find one that's not a really heavy plaster, because that's going to hit kind of that tipping point I talked about, you can find interesting things. Or I was walking through the store one day and saw this super cool chocolate mixer, and I thought, like, wouldn't that be just the cutest little like Turkish parasol topper or something? Like, I think it would be adorable. So it's interesting going around and looking at other objects, and it's like, how would that look on top of a parasol? Oh my goodness, the wind just blew that entirely off. Okay.
You have a question in the chat box. Have you used any UV blocking fabric or lining?
I have not, and I probably should, because I've managed to burn underneath the shade of a building next to a pavilion. So yeah, I don't know, is it particularly heavier? I'm not overly familiar with it other than the canvas that you use in tents.
I know just from experience that wool does offer some UV blocking. So if you're looking at natural fibers, if you just Google like SPF from wool or SPF from silk, you can find it, or polyester or whatever fabric you're going to use, you can find out how UV blocking it is.
Nice. I wonder if it makes a difference if it's like tropical weight or a thicker.
There is also a preparation that you can buy online by RIT that is a sunblock.
Really?
To add to fabric, to turn it sunblocking, to use for clothing weight, things like cottons and so forth. I think it's called RIT Sunblock. I used it years ago for all my baby garb because my daughter is very, very fair. And her first Penzic, she was 2. And all of her clothing was dipped in this stuff. It lasts about 4 or 5 washings, so it should last a season since you're not washing it.
Right. No, I don't. I have occasionally gone out in the rain with my parasol and then had people just like gasp in horror. But it's raining out there. I'm like, that's why I have this. Is it a spray on, or is it, you mentioned dipping, you have to like dilute it down and concentrate?
A wash additive. You add it to the rinse of, so when you're pre-washing your fabric to make your item, that's when I would put it in.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to look at that. Thank you. Oh, okay. The chocolate mixer is called a moino. Did I say that correctly? I didn't know the proper name for that. Thank you.
And there's another question. The Roman one is only for early Roman. What was the date on your pictorial evidence?
I believe that was 5th to 6th century, which I can verify. Oh, I helpfully named it Bath Kit in my picture folder. Good job, me. Scroll back up. I will look that up and make sure to include it. I thought that I stuck that in there, but I want to say that was 4th to 6th century.
Okay, and then, so in the chat box, Franca Donato has posted the Amazon link to the Rit Guard, the Rit Sun treatment, if you guys want to look that up. And then there's another question about your earrings, because they're amazingly lovely, and they want to know where you got them.
I made them. So on Wish, they had these little Laurel wreath earrings. See if I can, it's trying to autofocus on me and not the jewelry. There we go. These little Laurel wreath earrings, and the little colored bauble was down at the bottom. So I just moved it up and then put a pearl drop on it because there's a Bronzino portrait where she's got a little wreath with a pearl drop, and I always thought, oh, someday if I'm gonna make some of those. So I did.
And so what I'll make sure to do is I'll get you to either Facebook message me the handout you have for this class, and I can
absolutely.
post it along with the YouTube video, and I can also post it in the Cadoro Salon group for people to find it. One more question. What style and period dress are you wearing right now?
This is a 16th century Florentine sans belt. So got, you know, my satana, got my fancy pockets here. See if I can pull them out. These are my Segosia. Here we go. I love having nice deep pockets. I've got a little, what's in Tatiana's pockets? Money? Oh, my kids gave me some Mardi Gras beads, chapstick. I've got a little phone holder and stuff in there too, and I keep like my little SCA business cards, and usually some pearls to give out if anybody has something that I find super cool. Oh yeah, this pocket. There we go. That's some pearls. And I could not find, the other things I could not find is my silk net mantilla here, but we're making do.
One more question. Could you show the parasol with the castle trim again?
Yeah, totally. I thought that one was really cool looking. Get that pulled up. Is it this one? Yeah. Share. This one. I can zoom in on that for you. Whoa. There we go. It's about as big as that's gonna go. Makes me think of those the truncated linens you see in the 15th century whenever it's a royal person and they have just like the little crown topper. Have you seen those? I think they're super cute.
We have a question from Franca for you.
Okay.
Actually, I have a comment. That picture that you just put up in Castle Davanzati in Florence, that's above a corner fireplace. It's like the hood of a corner fireplace.
Interesting.
Have you seen that before? Davanzati.
Type
let
that in
me
the chat. I will slaughter it.
let me see if I can find a picture. If I can, I will send it to you.
I would love that. Thank you. What tips do I have for SCA on a budget? Actually, that was why I called the class what I did. So this is a couple of years since I've done the pricing. Let me pull my handout out because at the end, I include how much it costs to make these. So it takes roughly a yard of fabric to do any of the styles. 2 if you want to fully line it. I personally didn't want to fold all my seams under and I wanted more protection, so I did. So 1 to 2 yards for the canopy. And then I priced out all of the dowels and the finials and everything. So the ribs and stretcher one cost me $12 to $15 plus my 2 yards of fabric. The hoop style one was more expensive because it has the 1/2 inch wide hoop wire in it. And that one was $23 to $25 plus fabric. And the Roman bath kit, the cost for the chair and table legs and whatnot, ended up being $11 plus fabric. So that's my tip for being on a budget. It doesn't cost a whole lot to start with, and it only takes a yard of fabric. So.
What about the one before the castle trim?
Okay.
One right before.
I can pull that one up. It's got seashells and stuff.
Is that the one you want, Zelia? The ones with the seashells?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Sorry, I misread that.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I can, I don't know, zip these up, my extra pictures, and get them to you somehow. If I don't know how that would work for including, but we can figure that out later.
And what type of fabric did you use for the expandable umbrella?
I used silk on all of those. They were a dupioni, but I like the ones that aren't terribly slubby. It was just very difficult to find. Oh, right. Let me share out again because that was words. I have other parasols and lessons learned really quick. So I was requested to make a parasol for Her Majesty when I lived in Atenvelt. So I came up with kind of a kingdom parasol, and this was my design, incorporating the Atenvelt heraldry into a parasol. And I wanted to have kind of a little crown for the topper. There were different designs. I ultimately went with that one, and I made the topper out of leather. So there it is, protecting the crown. I don't know that their entourage is getting it quite over their heads, but you can see their face. So, you know. This one I made out of silk twill. I do not recommend. It has far too much stretch in it. You want something that is stiff, like a taffeta or a dupioni. I ended up having to do a secondary support so that this one wouldn't kind of floop in on itself because the twill was so drapey. Additionally, if you plan to do any heraldry on your parasol like that, so that, see how this is like not all one color, it's got the sun on the top. Apply it to the top like you would kind of an applique. Don't piece it together. I actually have a seam right here for the top part, and it was just to fight, and I had to put a second little ring in to support that. So make whatever your base is out of one piece and then apply your designs on top of that. That's the crown topper. I made it out of leather so that it would be nice and lightweight, and it's the same base as the silver one. It's that little wooden clock face. This is the carrying bag that goes with it, with a backup flat topper in case somebody loses the crown, because, you know, we've all seen the Kingdom trailer. Those were just some design sketches for friends. So there you go. That was the thing I meant to include, was that don't use silk twill, use something sturdy or crisp like a taffeta or a dupioni. Yeah, I'm happy. Thank you so much for putting this on. I've really enjoyed seeing all of the different classes, and it's been nice, like, still getting to kind of have event things, even though we can't go anywhere.
I know, right? Especially Italian event things, because
Yes.
we're special. We're special people. In the chat box, there's people saying thank you for the class, and you have inspired us to want to make parasols, so thank you.
Yay. Thank
Sorry,
you.
you can see it.